Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something huge, how artificial intelligence is completely changing the game for ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance. We're going to see how it turns what used to be a reporting nightmare into a real engine for action. So, how on earth does a machine learn to think about sustainability? Let's get into it.
Okay, so if you've ever felt like you're just drowning in a sea of ESG reports, emissions data, and supply chain audits, you are not alone. I mean, the sheer volume of this stuff is a massive, massive challenge for any person or even a whole team of people to really handle.
But what if we had a totally new kind of intelligence? Something that could copy our own ability to think, but do it on a scale we can't even imagine. Well, that's exactly the promise of AI. It can automate all the boring work, spot patterns we'd never see, and even predict future outcomes from things like carbon emissions data or really complex supply chain risks.
So, the big question is, how does this actually work? What's the magic going on behind the curtain? Let's take a look inside the engine that powers all this AI, a really cool concept called machine learning.
See, unlike the software we're used to, which is super rigid and needs a programmer to write out every single if this then that rule, machine learning just flips that whole idea on its head. It actually lets the computer learn all by itself, just by looking at the data you give it.
And this right here shows you the fundamental difference. In old school programming, a person writes the rules, but with machine learning, you just feed the machine a ton of data. We're talking carbon data, news articles, supplier reports, you name it, and it discovers the rules and the patterns all by itself. Now, this whole learning thing doesn't just happen instantly. It's a process, and it happens in 3 really important stages that build the AI's intelligence from the ground up. And it all starts with the single most important ingredient there is.
First things first, the AI needs data, and not just a little bit of it, a lot of it. We're talking about information just streaming in from sensors, from satellite images that can spot deforestation, and from thousands and thousands of text reports. And just like when you're building a house, the quality of your raw materials is absolutely everything.
In fact, there's a famous saying in this field that captures this idea perfectly. Garbage in, garbage out. It's so simple, right? If you feed the AI bad data, messy, inaccurate, biased data, you are guaranteed to get bad results. This machine isn't magic. It can only ever be as good as the information it learns from. And get this, that first step of just collecting and cleaning the data, it is so critical that it can determine up to 80% of the AI model's final success. That's huge. Getting the data right is by far the most important part of the whole process. Okay, so next up, once we have that nice, clean data, the model has to train. And a good way to think about it is like a student cramming for a huge exam. The AI just goes over thousands, sometimes millions of data points, again and again and again, until it really starts to understand the deep patterns and the principles that are hidden inside. And this is where the payoff is. After all that training comes something called inference. This is where the AI takes everything it's learned and starts applying it to brand new situations it's never seen before. It can now make its own judgments in real time, like, say, automatically adjusting a factory's temperature to save energy, all without a human having to do a thing.
But here's the thing, not all learning is the same. Just like a good mechanic has a whole toolkit for different problems, AI has different learning methods for different ESG tasks. Let's walk through the main ones.
First up, we've got supervised learning. This is kind of like teaching with flashcards. We give the AI a giant data set where all the data is already labeled with the right answers. So the AI's job is to figure out the connection between the question and the answer.
This approach is absolutely perfect for making predictions. For instance, we can feed an AI years of past emissions data along with the results, and it learns how to predict future emissions. It can even be trained to scan corporate reports to spot potential greenwashing by flagging suspicious phrases. Pretty cool, right? But what if you don't have all the answers? What if you don't even really know what you should be looking for? Well, that's where unsupervised learning comes in. Think of it like a detective, just sifting through a pile of unlabeled data to find hidden clusters and structures all on its own.
And this is incredibly powerful for finding risks you didn't even know existed. Imagine feeding it data on thousands of suppliers in your supply chain. The AI can just automatically group them into different risk categories, like high environmental risk or poor labor practices, without you ever telling it what to look for in the first place.
And finally, we have the most dynamic method of all, reinforcement learning. This is all about learning by doing. The AI basically experiments. It takes actions in a virtual space, and then it gets feedback as either a reward or a penalty. Its goal is super simple: get the highest score possible. The fantastic real-world example of this is how Google uses AI in its massive data centers. And AI is constantly playing with thousands of settings for the cooling systems, and whenever an action lowers energy use, it gets a reward. Through millions of these little experiments, it actually taught itself how to cut the energy used for cooling by a staggering 40%.
Okay, so when you put all of these pieces together, you've got the super high-quality data, you've got the intense training, and you have this powerful toolkit of different learning methods. What do you actually get for ESG? You get an accelerator. AI becomes this incredible force multiplier for ESG. It's a system that can take in a constant flood of new information, learn from it, and make the best possible decisions in real time to drive both sustainability and business efficiency. It really does turn reactive reporting into proactive management.
So here's the big takeaway: why all this really matters. AI moves ESG away from being just promises on paper and into the world of provable action. And as the AI gets smarter and smarter, its data-driven judgments become the strongest possible evidence of a company's real-world commitment to sustainability. There's nowhere to hide.
And all of this leads to a really powerful and I think provocative question that we're really only just starting to be able to answer. As this kind of technology gets woven into every part of our economy, we have to ask ourselves, can AI truly help us create a sustainable world?